Tony is the co-creator and project manager of Bytecast. He leads the Austin innovation team for Gannett, focusing on design thinking to help build better products, storytelling tools, and workflows for the USA Today network. Tony previously served as a designer, art director, reporter, and managing editor before making the switch to building support tools. And lately, he's focused on smart speakers, and he'll be bringing all of that experience to us right now. Thank you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks. Really glad to be here. Let me get my slides set up. All right, so really I'm happy to be here. It's great to see a bunch of familiar faces over in the sidebar. We're going to talk about Bytecast, which is a Google News Initiative funded project that my team created about a year and a half ago, right before we went into the pandemic. But I want to talk about kind of audio more at the 30,000 feet view. And I want to be very clear up front when I'm talking about audio during this presentation, we're not talking about podcasts. There's a whole lot more audio out there than just podcasts. So with that, we're going to jump into it right now. So like you said, who am I? Why am I qualified to talk to you about all this? I'm not. I knew very little about audio coming into this. So I've been in journalism 25 years. I was a creative director, designer, managing editor, leading investigative projects. And then I had my mentor, Bill Church, got me into design thinking, forced me into design thinking. And it was a really interesting space to get into. And through that, I've gotten into product. And then lately, one of the projects I've been working on is becoming a founding member of the News Product Alliance. And I'm really excited about that work. It's some of the stuff that brings me a lot of joy right now, besides some of this audio stuff that we're going to talk about. So here's the team. I know a lot of people tend to put like team and information at the back of slides. I want my team right out front. So this morning, some of these people you saw this morning in Ray Soto's presentation. One of the things that's awesome about Bytecast, one of the things I'm most proud of, is we built it all in-house. So from design, conceptualization, ideation, to prototyping, to user testing, to actually designing or developing and coding, launching, all done in-house by my team and Ray Soto's emerging tech team under the watchful guys of Steve Dorsey over there. So wanted to show them and introduce them right up front. So audio is already here. And if we want to provide our customers with quality experiences, we need to create the right products now instead of letting other platforms dominate market share. And I tend to talk about our people, our readers, as customers. They're not just listeners, they're not just readers, they're customers. And that's one of the things that kind of the ethos behind the News Product Alliance and the work we're doing and that my team does is understanding what the audience is and meeting them there. I feel like we've been talking about this in journalism for the past 10 years, but we still talk about it like it's a new thing. So let's start with some stats. Here's how important audio analytics are before I get to the numbers. When I started doing this project a little over 2 years ago, like really diving into the research of it, a lot of audio research was just out on the internet. You could go to it and find it fairly easy. People were talking about smart speaker consumption, who owned it. All this, these stats are starting to go behind a paywall now. So stuff that was free is now very expensive to use. So most of the stats you'll see tend to come from 2019 to 2020. I was looking for stats for this year, and one of the places I used to get my data from wants $20,000 now for the data. So what's that tell us? Tells us it's very valuable and that people want this data and want this information because consumers are there and we need to create products for it. So you can see 24% of adults over the age of 18 own a smart speaker. So that's about 60 million people. And then 82% of people use a voice assistant on their smartphone. Voice assistants are very important to kind of the future that we envision. So that's just kind of our baseline right now. So let's perform a level set. Where are we? and where do we need to go? So first off, like I said, when we're talking about audio here, we're not talking about podcasts, because when you talk to everyone else, audio equals podcasts. So we conducted a survey among newsrooms, and our assumptions were verified. When asked, almost all reporters equate audio with podcasts. Short audio and voice interactions, so VUI, and then audio actualities, which are short snippets of audio, weren't on their radar at all. And we're going to go into that a little bit more in a slide later. So let's start at step one. We need to start training our technology and editorial staffs on voice user interfaces and conversational design. I'm going to get into conversational design later at the end of this. So what Bytecast is a low impact way to start implementing these best practices for VUI and recording and writing for voice audiences. When we talk to these newsrooms, I can't stress this enough. What you write isn't necessarily what customers want to hear. And I think there's a big disconnect there still. So, and the other part is let's build for the future. This is really the heart of Bytecast for me. Is legacy media missed web 1.0. We missed web mobile 1.0. We doubled down when Facebook told us to on video. We have the opportunity to be industry leaders in audio and voice if we start building the business case now, conduct targeted experiments, and perform thorough user testing. And more important, let's own our own data. There's this whole big conversation and all these laws being passed. It's very important for news organizations to understand what our data is, how our customers are related to it, and what we can do with that. So I told you about the study we performed with journalists. Here's what journalists think about audio. They feel they're not adequately trained in editing and equipment. And a lot of this, as we were conducting these interviews and talking to them, the pivot to video came up in almost probably every conversation. They feel the pressure to use audio when time constraints force the prioritization of other work, which is, we're too busy, we can't do this. There's misunderstandings about the audience for audio. So once again, that kind of goes back to audio equals podcasts. Smart audio is largely uncharted territory. Very few journalists I've talked to have smart speakers in their home. And that's something that, well, it comes down to privacy. They're afraid people are spying on them. Just being truthful and honest, that's what everyone tells me. I got over that like early in the beginning, but every time someone says it, I'm like looking over at my desk. I'm not at my home desk right now, but I actually can't say any of the voice assistants or devices when I'm at home because I have them all around and they trigger because of the research I've been doing for this. So if you're afraid of the, afraid is not the right word. If you have valid hesitancy towards a platform or a distribution that we use for our products, if there's hesitancy and mistrust there, there's obviously going to be pushback before, when we create products for those. So, and then this is a big one, is some have produced more audio in the past. So they started doing podcasts. They started experimenting with smart speakers early on. And then as news organizations couldn't find revenue there or didn't present the right business cases, they've dialed back. So we saw a lot of, early on, I would say probably before the pandemic, certainly, and even before the Gatehouse-Gannett merger, I was watching a lot of audio experiments pop up, and then they started to go down. So now what we have to do is develop all that work again. And so this all came from the journalists themselves. So it was really interesting when you start doing user research among the people creating the projects, the things you get back from them. So with all this in hand, we created Bytecast. So what is Bytecast? So Bytecast is an audio collection tool that's the first step of building a voice roadmap for our consumers, journalists, business, and industry. So like I said, this was initially funded through the Google News Initiative Challenge, and the native app accomplishes 3 goals. It creates an easy to use workflow for quickly capturing and uploading audio. It builds a library of content we can distribute to all voice platforms, and it accelerates the growth of audio inventory so we can license to platforms and ad networks. I mean, right now, you're talking about, when you talk about revenue, you're generally talking about programmatic advertising, although there's, in the podcast world, sponsored revenue is quickly growing, also in the YouTube video world. But we're still early on. I'm going to be very upfront about this. Revenue is still the hardest thing to tackle with this. So at its core, Bytecast was built to take the heavy lifting out of audio production. And let me be clear here. I'm not saying audio is overproduced at all. Podcasts are very hard to produce. They're very time consuming. I'm talking about like multiple workflows for different products. And in the case of audio actualities, we want to be able to quickly record, tag, and upload. So what you're looking at here on the screen is literally the 3 screens of the app. There's a couple little more things it does, but you open the app, you hit record, you can immediately click publish or save. I'm showing you the very short version right now. So when you hit publish, it brings up this screen, and you can put in your description, you can put in your tags. And there's a lot of stuff this does in the background as well. So it's using geolocation, which is going to be very important later in the coming years. And it uploads all of this directly to our audio content management system, which is Omni. From there, that'll be in a later slide. So once it's in Omni, it can go anywhere. So we can import it into our CMS. We can throw it out on social. Reporters, we're working on something right now, like as soon as it goes up, reporters get texted a link to their audio so they can directly share it. And then as you can see down here, metadata is included, and then it uploads, and then APIs allow us to push to all these different platforms. So here's how we're using Bytecast. We've started on focusing on short audio clips that can be distributed individually or combined to create longer programming and delivered through automated feeds. One of the really cool things about Bytecast that I didn't have in my initial user journeys, and that Ray Soto and his team kind of built into it, and I was like, wow. And then when they did it, I realized there's so many uses for it. Is you can hold your phone up, talk, hey, this is Tony Elkins, I'm here on the scene, this is what's going on, short audio description, upload. Or if you're at a game, because of the way we built it and because of the in-app editing, you can record what happened in the first quarter of a football game, and then the second, and you can push all that out live, or you can build a podcast or programming on the go right then. So there's a lot of cool things that are built into this, like beyond our user journeys, that were additional features that are really starting to be used, and some really cool stuff. So we're also publishing to our own platforms. So this is social, smart speaker, and voice assistant environments. So we're building for the present, but we want to be ready when wearables and voice assistants are a ubiquitous part of our lives. And then here's the different content types that we're looking at. So breaking news delivered through geolocation, taxonomy, and tagging, sports scores and updates, courts. This is really popular. So our biggest test right now is with our company NewsQuest in the UK. And they found court reporting. So not crime like we tend to think of it in the US, but courts. So events nearby, and then entertainment recommendations. So I want to talk a little bit about, before I get to these 2 slides, when I talk about breaking news, there's no way to visualize this, so you just have to listen to me for a minute. Our initial use case for this is if you're walking down the street and you hear a lot of sirens and helicopters and something going on, which did happen to me one day on the South Congress here in Austin. It's like, what's going on? So I'm trying to walk, I'm looking through Twitter, I'm putting in Austin hashtags, nothing's coming up. I get to my destination, I'm looking on it, nothing's happening. I really can't see anything because cops have the road blocked off. And then about 2 hours later, when I'm back at work, I'm like, oh yeah, let me look at that. Come to find out, someone who, a young man who had some obviously mental issues, was attempting suicide on a crane. So we have a lot of development going on, and he had climbed on top of a crane. Fortunately, he didn't jump. Cops were able to, mental health care workers were able to save him. But it got me thinking, like, when you're in an event, it's very hard to find information. And I was wearing headphones. So what could happen if I could just tap my headphones and say, "Hey Siri, what's going on right now?" And through geolocation, it went out and found this news event that was tagged to my location and uploaded it and read it directly to me in a reporter's voice. So our dream for this is, if I was walking down and something happened, I would be able to go to my voice assistant and say, "Hey, what's going on?" With one of our reporters. And just for some context, the Austin American-Statesman is on South Congress and was just a few blocks from this. In that case, it was very likely we had a reporter on scene very quickly and knew what was going on, talked to the PIO, would be able to upload that quickly. And then through the system of it being geolocated and tagged, it would deliver the news to me. So that's kind of what we're building for. But like I said, this is step one. We've got to train and get our reporters used to this. So here's the audio journey I was talking to earlier. So our audio goes into Omni, and then these are all the different places it can go. So you have your podcast distributors. Those are your bigger platforms. We have our CMS. You have off-platform news, like Apple News, AMP, which is done. This was built before AMP decided to go away. You have all your smart speakers, and then of course social. But the important thing is getting audio quickly into this CMS so we can then put it everywhere. So let's talk about some numbers. This is really exciting. So all of this is a 30-day clip comparison from our partners at NewsQuest. These are, sorry, trying to get my numbers down here. I'm having to move this little thing as I talk. There we go. So this is listening duration. This is a 30-day clip consumption comparison from NewsQuest. We have 85% of our listeners listening to at least a quarter of the clip. 76% of listeners finishing half the clip, 68% finishing 75% of the clip, and 58% of listeners finishing the entire clip. Now, how many consumers read 100% of our articles? Because I'll lay heavy money it's not 58%. So when we started to see these numbers, we got really excited. And looking back historically over some of the markets we're testing them, we're finding these are replicable in almost every single market we're going into. So some of our even initial early test markets in Florida, we had a user who was already creating this type of audio, and we gave him a very early version of the app, and he kind of set the standard for our analytics. We found this was the case. Now, as we're onboarding additional partners, we're finding this pretty much aligns no matter what the location is, how many clips they produce, how long the clips are. We're finding these numbers across our entire usage. So engagement. So this right here, this number is based off 50 clips with an average time of 2.5 minutes. So we've created 82 hours of listening. It's like creating new product out of thin air. So this is very little cost at their end. This is an hour of training with the producers. So we have a whole training program built up. So they spend about 45 minutes with us training and then go out and use their phone. And we're creating this content. So 50 clips creates 82 hours of consumers listening to this content. This number also, like the last numbers, we're seeing this across, no matter what 30 days I compare, we're getting about the same per 50 clips. As the clips go up, the listening hours go up as well. So where and how are they listening? So owned platforms, 88%, that is our own platforms. So that's article pages across the USA Today and NewsQuest products. That's when we take Omni's embeds and we place them on article pages. No matter what audio outside of podcasts, all audio we've experimented with, we found placing audio in content containers on article pages from either mobile or the desktop is how consumers like to consume this. So social, that's going out to Twitter and Facebook. It's only 10%. Mobile, of course, you would think it would be high, and it is 70%, or almost 70%, and then 25% for desktop. So this is really the point of all of this is we need to teach our producers about conversational design and audio. So conversation's not a new interface. It's the oldest interface. Like literally the act of speaking is one of the ways we communicate. So conversation is how humans interact with one another and have for millennia. We should be able to use the same principles to make our digital systems easy and intuitive to use by finally getting machines to play by our rules. One of the points with Bytecast, and I say this all the time, this is step one for something that's going to happen much or a long time in the future, is and Jeremy Gilbert was talking about this earlier today too, about how we're creating all these AI functions. We've got to learn how to create that content. AIs can read back our content, but if we're not creating the right content, then listeners aren't going to have the right experience. So we've really got to understand that the content we're creating doesn't live in a single container anymore. It's got to be written or rewritten, which involves work, I know, but it's got to be written for video. It's got to be written for the word. It's got to be written for the mobile screen. It's got to be transposed to video. It's got to be read in audio, and all those products have different demands and user journeys and customers that want a certain thing. So with Bytecast, through the training we're doing, we're really trying to start at step one and instruct our reporters and content creators what conversational design means and what we should be doing in order to build the right products. So how do we implement that? So training, obviously. Creating content for audio is not the same as writing a story. Right now, we have thousands of writers working for us, and we need to give them the tools and training to be successful content creators on new and more emerging platforms. It's not enough to hand them an app and a mic and call them audio producers. I was in a newsroom, I was a managing editor when we did the pivot to video, and I saw it fail. I saw reporters get so frustrated because we didn't train them to use the tools. We didn't have successful products to show them, hey, here's what your work is doing. We didn't approach it the right way. We're really trying to approach the implementation of Bytecast in a completely different way. So this was built by people from my entire team came from newsrooms. We interviewed probably upwards of 50 journalists talking about like how they interact with their work, how they interact with audio. We've taken all that and we've synthesized it. And we've created a product. And it's not just about the app. Like I said, you can't just hand them an app and say, we built this for you with your input and hand it to them. You've got to have the training modules to go with it. Rachel Kilroy, who's on my team, is in charge of training. She sits down with every newsroom. We use every tool at our disposal to talk to the people that are using this every day and say, here's how this works. Here's how we want it to work and expect it to work. We want you to go play with it and then tell us where we're wrong. Come back to us and tell us what features we're missing. We want to talk and have an open discussion because we still think we're in our MVP phase, and not beta, but MVP phase. We want to understand what your user journey is. Tell us how this works, where it doesn't work. Oh, and then we're going to show you like how consumers are interacting with it. So we send data and analytics reports. So that's why it's important for us to own all of this, is we have to understand how our consumers are interacting with it and then what we can do with it. Because if that comes all the way down to our producers, then they're excited about it, then they're jazzed about it. You can go, hey, look at what you did. You had, your 1 minute clip created 30 hours of listening. I mean, just think about how many instances that is. And then they get really excited about it when they see that their work is validated and it means something. So all this is leading up to something else. So the metaverse is coming. You've seen that on Twitter and everything. Voice is going to be set, and audio is going to be such a huge part of the future. And we have to be ready for it. That's why every little step matters. That's why all this training matters. If 5 years passes and Facebook goes, I hate saying that, but Facebook is probably going to own the metaverse based off all the study we're doing. If Facebook comes and says, here's the metaverse, we're not going to be ready for it. It's going to take the work of what Bytecast is starting to do. It's going to take the AR work that Ray Soto and his team is going to do. It's going to take all the people working on AI that Jeremy Gilbert mentioned earlier to come together in the newsrooms and understand like what our future products are going to be. And we're doing the research on this right now. One of my team partners, Stephen Harding, has been conducting a content strategy workshop based on the metaverse. So I've always said XR or mixed reality, but we're looking at this. So some of you may recognize this. This is Amy Webb's framework for future casting. And we've been looking at this for the past couple of weeks in this workshop and going, where are we? Where do we need to be? And voice is a huge part of it. We're going to be interacting with voice user interfaces. We're going to be listening to things more because, like Erica Hall says, designing the container first makes even less sense when the containers are starting to disappear. That struck, so this is from her book, Conversational Design. That struck me so much. And that is really what the future of journalism is containers are starting to disappear. It's in your ears. Phones are going to go away. Article pages are going to go away. So we need to be ready for it. So that's what we created Bytecast for, was to start planting the seeds of what audio really means, not just in news, but in people's lives. So that's the end of my slides. And I am more than happy to have a conversation with you about the rest of this.
Great. Thank you so much. That was pretty amazing. Actually, right off the bat, one of our other speakers, Amy Schmitz-Weiss, has a question for you. Question for Tony. Thank you for your presentation. I've been doing research for years in geolocated news and spatial journalism. In regards to thinking about the future of audio voice experiences, how much can this be tied to the mindset of thinking spatially about the spaces and places around us? How do you think this can be done?
Ooh, that's a smart question. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer it. I don't think so. I'm glad you're doing research on it because I don't think we have an answer. I don't have an answer to begin to think we have a strategy for that. When you talk, like I said, everyone right now is so focused on podcasts. Everyone wants to create the next daily. Everyone wants to, create the next whatever, murder mystery, top of the charts podcast. And we're not really thinking about audio on its own. And when you start to think about places and geolocation, I think news organizations, because we are who we are, we think about the people first. We think about privacy. We think about the First Amendment. We've been hesitant to use the tools at our disposal because, like, what does that mean if news orgs are tracking everyone by their phone? And that's really where geolocation gets into, is what are we getting from, what data are we tracking, or what are we putting out there? And I think until just recently, within the past couple of years, places beyond the New York Times and the Washington Post have really started doing development research around that. So it's new. So my question back to you is, where do we need to start?
Be a meeting of the brilliant minds right there between you and Amy. Amy, if you have a follow-up question, feel free to she's like, let's talk soon, Tony. All right, it's a date. Ian, I think you have a question. Ian, also, you should get like an award for most engaged participant thus far today. So please go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Oh, thank you. Tony, I was curious, what type of, you mentioned design thinking up front, and I was curious what type of design thinking exercises you found to be most effective in journalism tech innovation?
Intensive 3-day minimum in-person workshops are phenomenal. I
great.
miss them dearly. So it's really, I just ran an asynchronous workshop and I have a lot of lessons to learn from it. So I'm going to be building that framework over the next couple of weeks, and really kind of diving into where I failed, where my stakeholders failed. I got valuable information from it. I just didn't do it the right way. One of the things I think about when it comes to like design thinking and product ideation in journalism is we just don't put enough time and effort into it because we don't understand it. Getting 3 days from a team of 12 is almost impossible. I have to beg and plead every time I want to run a true workshop. Most of the times, like I get 2 days, day and a half, or here's a few hours here, here's a few hours there. But when we do it and we come through with a product and we hand this report back to our high level stakeholders, they go, why isn't everyone doing this? Why don't we have more of this? And it's buy-in. It's strictly buy-in is the biggest hurdle to design thinking in journalism.
Ian, any follow-up? Are you good with that?
Well, I would be curious if there's any specific exercises that you do include in 3 days. If there's something that you typically skipped that is generally part of the process. So say, do you have time for diary work, or do you skip that? Do you do sacrificial concepts, things like?
So I've got something, I've mixed kind of IDEO's framework with Google Sprint, and have landed somewhere in the middle. I'm not as heavy on prototyping as Google Sprint is. I am super heavy on user journeys. I really think journalists, journalism organization leaders, that could be revenue, marketing, whatever, don't spend enough time understanding who our customers are. So I tend to load that. So I make people go out and, well, this is all pre-COVID, but make them go out and interview people and make them interact with customers, find out what people want. My favorite exercise, whenever we can return to in-person, is I send people to the libraries because those are readers, they're engaged with information. And I think I always try to make a point of doing these workshops, hopefully somewhere around a library, and make them go out and talk to the public.
Really great, thank you.
Great. So a question in the chat from Maggie, question for Mr. Elkins. As we move towards audio, how do we make sure it's continuously inclusive for deaf and hard of hearing communities, as well as nonverbal communities, if it's even possible?
That's a great question. So how do you make something that's meant to be heard accessible for all? And I think that is a question that should be valid for every distribution platform. And I really think that's a space that AI is going to help. Natural language generation is going to help on. So if we're recording stuff, certainly we want transcripts to put those out in different places. I can tell you we're not there yet. We're working with our content management partners to find out how to make all our products accessible. But it's going to have to be a concerted effort. And the only way to do that right now is just throwing more resources at it. So that's not something that, it's something that we're talking about, but it's something I have not solved yet.
Maggie, do you have any follow-up? Got a little bit of time. Okay. Feel free to put it in chat or unmute if you'd like. From Daniel. Oh, great, Maggie, thanks. A lot of the push toward making your own daily or post reports is wanting to get into the audio ad market. What does the ad space look like as we see the creation of the metaverse?
Daniel, if you can figure that out, you're going to be a very rich person. It's going to be, I imagine it's going to be even more targeted. Everyone's joked about the Minority Report scene for so long. So if those of you who are younger, that's like an ancient Tom Cruise movie now. Or you walk by billboards and there's some RF signal or something, and it's advertising delivered straight for you. So I think it's going to be a mix of that. I can imagine tracking. If you look at like the types of data that we're gathering, so like sentiment sentiment information is like, what kind of audio are you listening to? Is it always serious? Are your ads going to talk to you like this? Or is it going to be super happy and like, hey, you want this? We're going to know like all the types of content you consume and what that content means. And I think that's really the future of ad targeting, is if you're a serious person, you're going to get, ads for, documentaries on Netflix or something. Let's take Netflix, right? So how are they going to target me? I tend to watch like nature shows, and I hate horror shows. My wife and I had to split algorithms early on, like the second they did user profiles, because she loves horror movies and I can't stand them. So then if we look at that, they're going to know exactly how to target me because of my viewing preferences, and they're going to match the audio for that. Like when commercials come on, it's not going to be, this like loud noises and everything. For me, they're going to target me with like soft noises. It's going to be very dialed back. So you start layering all this information on top of each other, and I don't know, maybe one day we're not going to be able to distinguish ads from content.
Any
which
follow
is
up,
kind
Daniel?
of already happened on Instagram. I'm like, ooh, there's a piece of camping gear. Oh man, that's an ad. Never mind. Crap.
Thank you so much. From David Fritzy. Hello, fellow INN member. Glad to see you here. David Fritzy, is the quality of the audio you get now from a journalist with a cell phone and an app, and the quality of most typical journalist's voice acceptable enough to sustain the product?
I imagine Ray Soto just laughed if he's in the room here. That was something that we tackled early on. So in Bytecast, yes, the audio is good right now. Is it podcast quality? No. One of the things I did, because this was funded by the Google News Initiative, I had actual funding to do a lot of stuff with this. I ordered a ton of lav mics. So really high quality, Shure lav mics. And everyone that's a test partner, I'm sending them a box of mics. I've still got like 4 boxes of microphones in my condo right now. But the reason I mentioned Ray laughing is one of his developers set the bitrate low on purpose because we didn't want to take up too much memory on our reporters' phones. So we created a user story and said, oh, I'm a reporter. I'm going to get mad if I'm using Bytecast and all of a sudden my memory is gone on my phone. We immediately in our first test said, this audio is crap. So we went back through and dialed it all the way up. We put the bit rate as high as it could go. It's super high quality. And reporters said, oh my God, this is great. Thank you. Because what we're finding is with the mic and just the phone, that it is good. And we have to also put some faith in our customers. Being on scene and doing breaking news, you understand that they give us a certain amount of leeway. They're not looking for something super polished and for music to be cutting in. It kind of goes back to TV, and like that experience is when we have these big breaking news things, you don't see people at the desk, everything's perfect. All the graphics are on screen already. And it's like, oh, we just got a report, we're going here. Sometimes there's confusion. So we have to give a little bit of faith to our customers, and not everything has to be polished and perfect. So there can be a little bit. Our content producers want it to be perfect. So we think we found a good mix.
I would also think, just with all of the, the podcasting and the audio we're listening to now, it's not as jarring to hear less than studio quality audio.
And then, it's certainly it's changing. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and even with phones, I know a couple of people who record podcasts with their phones and their mics. And after I listen, as long as I don't listen to like something that's super highly produced back to back with that, I can't tell, or it doesn't bother me at least.
Sure. David, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Are you good? Do you have an additional follow-up question?
No, thanks. And hello, Pam.
Hello.
Oh, it's very interesting. Great.
Thank you. So while other people are putting in questions or asking, I just got to tell you, Tony, that Damon threw shade at you and said, not ancient Tony, and get off my lawn. I think he's referring to the Minority Report. Is that right, Damon? Okay. I'm just saying, guys, a gray in your beard. All right. That's all I got to say. And Ray definitely was laughing. Do we have any additional questions at the moment? We've got some minutes to hang out for a bit longer. What do you think, one of my favorite questions, and by the way, this whole day has been pure journalism, because whenever you ask a presenter a question, it's the same answer you tend to get from all your editors. It depends. It used to drive me crazy. I want the blueprint, but no, it depends. So with this and this product that you have and this, really interesting app, what has been the biggest challenge in, I guess, shifting journalists' mindset from, to this?
Exactly that, shifting journalism mindset. Where here's the thing is, you could build the best product and you could provide the best use case and journalists still don't want to do it. And it was really interesting. We had some partners early on that were some big audio producers, and they grabbed it and they used it a couple of times, and we saw usage fall off. And then, because we went to them and we said, hey, we see that you're big audio producers. We want to give you this, and we're going to train you and invest in this. And they used it, they liked it, we got great feedback. They're not using it as much as we thought. Whereas with our NewsQuest partner, that was a publisher came to us, or I guess the equivalent of the CEO publisher for that newspaper chain, came to us and said, hey, I heard you were doing this thing, I want to try it out. And because he was at the top and he kind of delivered that message down, he found some people that were really interested in it, really excited about it, and they've become our best test partner because they wanted to do it. So it just really comes down to the people, the journalists on your team have to be excited about it. I think buy-in is the single most important thing with this. And then there's an understanding of what the technology can do. So I could get every journalist in the country, and it doesn't matter if they work for Gannett, New York Times, Washington Post, to use this app if I could record phone calls. But we can't, because Apple locks that down. If we could have access to that and I could create a true full recording application that then transposed or transcribed everything, this would be awesome. But there are certain features that reporters want that they can't have. So therefore it's not a perfect application. So therefore we're not going to use it. So it really is just talking to people. I was going to say fighting that mentality, but that's wrong, because we have to get out of, because that's a problem that's wrong with the culture of journalism, is we have to get out of that mindset of fighting against this current. No, I need to have more conversations with those journalists and with those editors. And I have to say, I have to help them understand that this future's coming, whether they want it to or not. But at the same time, I understand how hard this is to go and to work into your workflow and your systems. And that's really where the design thinking helps me, is I can go in and say, hey, let's not just talk about Bytecast. Let's talk about this as a full ecosystem. How much time are you spending on X, Y, and Z? Is there something we can cut out? Is there something that's easier? How can we make these steps easier so you can play a part in taking step one towards the future of journalism?
Yeah, Gary, you have your hand raised. Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, Tony, I apologize if I missed this, but are you licensing Bytecast, or is it available only for Gannett journalists, or how is that working?
I would love to license this one day. So that was in our initial pitch to Google, because they make you do a business case for it. And it's in my plans, absolutely. I've had several organizations reach out. So NewsQuest is getting some popularity in this from the testing they've done. They've had some write-ups, and a Spanish newspaper chain asked me if they could use it. I've had some others in the US. I'm not at that point yet, but it is in my plans. I would love to be able to put this out as an enterprise platform one day.
Okay, so what if somebody who's listened to this or listened to you talk, you've totally convinced them the power of voice and audio and the power of that storytelling, and they thought, well, okay, it's not licensed yet, it's not available yet. Maybe I don't want to license it. I'm just going to record on my phone and then upload the audio. what's then the argument for, yeah, but you're missing this, this, and this from Bytecast?
It's the speed. It's the workflow.
Uh-huh.
Honestly, that's all Bytecast is workflow.
Mhm.
So what it does is reporter opens it up, does the recording, puts in a few tags, and then they don't have to mess with it again. It goes directly to their audio CMS. And then the people in our, either assignment editor, social editor, someone's grabbing that and put it where it needs to go. They can edit it on their phone too. So it does have some like built-in editing capabilities. You can go find any app that does what Bytecast does in its core functions, except grab all that metadata. And there's a back end to this I didn't talk about. So when we use Firebase as kind of a back end application system for this. It connects to their Gannett.com accounts. It auto loads programs and playlists. So there's a lot of stuff done in the background to make the content visible that the reporters don't have to worry about.
Yeah, I was thinking metadata was probably one of the big advantages. And just unrelated to that, one of the things you said that just really struck me was what you write isn't what customers want to hear. I thought that is a really good advice to take away.
Yeah, we have to put our customers first. It's just product 101. And you don't, this is something I've learned. This is something I've definitely learned in my work with being around all the people who founded the MPA and all the people I've met because of that, is product should put customers first. And like, that's why tech won. They put products first. They listened to their customers.
Yep.
They created user journeys. They went back and remade stuff. It takes an act of Congress to redo an article page in our industry. And yet you'll see product rollouts, every 15 days at Instagram or TikTok. And when something doesn't work immediately, guess what? They sunset it. They don't go, oh, we suck $1.5 million into that. It's going to work. They go, nope, that didn't work. Customer doesn't want it. We're leaving. We've got to have that mentality with these products to succeed.
So the courage to walk away.
Yeah.
There's a question again from our most engaged person ever, Ian. Does Bycast also ingest text for speech rendering?
Not at this time. So this is one part of Gannett's voice strategy. Someone on our product team, Kevin Goff, is actually doing a ton of research in that right now. And we just rolled out a new product in our Sports Plus app. We're actually using speech to text and text to speech, I think through the Microsoft environment. So I know we're performing some experiments and putting some products out, but that is not my world of audio right now.